He bought a ticket to California. He never arrived. A broken stagecoach and brown eyes changed everything.
Subscribe to Wild Sky Stories. Turn on the bell icon so you can do not miss any new video.
The dust of 1,000 miles clung to Samuel Thornton's worn leather boots as he stepped off the stagecoach in Copper Springs, Arizona territory. He had intended to travel straight through to California, where a job awaited him at his uncle's shipping company. That was the plan. That had always been the plan. But fate had other ideas when the stagecoach driver announced they needed 3 days for repairs after the rear axle cracked crossing the dry riverbed. Samuel was a man of 32 years who had spent the better part of his life running from memories that lived in the walls of his family home in Boston. His mother had passed when he was young, and his father followed her into the ground just last winter. There was nothing left for him in the East except ghosts and empty rooms. So he sold everything, packed a single bag, and bought a ticket to the Pacific coast where salt air and new beginnings promised to wash away his grief. Copper Springs was not much more than a collection of weathered buildings clinging to the edge of the desert. A general store, a hotel, a church with a crooked steeple, and a handful of houses scattered like seeds thrown carelessly from a farmer's hand. The kind of place people passed through on their way to somewhere better. Samuel secured a room at the Dusty Rose Hotel, a name far grander than the establishment deserved. The wallpaper was peeling, the bed was hard, and the window overlooked nothing but an empty corral. But it would serve its purpose for 3 days. On his second morning in town, Samuel wandered to the general store to purchase a new journal. Writing had become his companion during these lonely months of travel. He pushed open the creaking door and stepped inside, greeted by the scent of leather, spices, and old wood. That was when he saw her. She stood behind the counter, her dark hair pulled back in a simple braid that fell over one shoulder. Her skin was sun-kissed, speaking of a life lived outdoors rather than in parlors and drawing rooms. She was not the kind of woman who would grace the pages of fashion magazines or turn heads at society balls. But there was something in her eyes, a deep brown that held both warmth and sorrow, that stopped Samuel in his tracks. She looked up at him, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. "Can I help you find something?" she asked. Her voice carried a slight accent that Samuel could not quite place. "A journal," he managed, suddenly feeling foolish. "If you have one." She smiled, and it transformed her entire face. "We have a few. Follow me." Her name was Elena Vasquez, and she had inherited the general store from her father who had passed away 2 years prior. She ran it alone, with occasional help from the elderly widow who lived next door. Samuel learned all of this within the first hour of their meeting, during which he purchased not only a journal, but also supplies he did not need, simply to extend their conversation. By that evening, Samuel found himself volunteering to help her move heavy crates that had arrived on the supply wagon. By the following morning, he was repairing a broken shelf that had been bothering her for months. "You don't have to do this," Elena said, watching him work from across the store. "You're just passing through." Samuel paused, hammer in hand. "I don't mind. I have nothing but time for the next 2 days." But even as he said the words, something shifted in his chest. A quiet voice whispered that 2 days would never be enough. That night, Elena invited him to share dinner with her in the small kitchen behind the store. She cooked a simple meal of beans and cornbread, but to Samuel, it tasted like the finest cuisine he had ever experienced. They talked for hours as the candles burned low, sharing stories of loss and loneliness that neither had spoken aloud to anyone else. Elena told him about her mother, who had died giving birth to her, about her father, who had raised her alone in this small town and taught her everything he knew about running a business, about the man who had promised to marry her 3 years ago, but left one night without a word, taking her heart and her trust with him. "I stopped believing in love after that," she admitted, her eyes fixed on the flickering candle flame. It seemed easier to stop believing than to keep hoping. Samuel reached across the table and placed his hand over hers. It was a small gesture, perhaps too forward for such a short acquaintance, but it felt right. It felt necessary. "I understand," he said softly. "After my father died, I stopped believing that life could hold anything good. I thought if I just kept moving, kept traveling, I could outrun the emptiness." Elena looked up at him, and tears glistened in her eyes. "Has it worked?" Samuel shook his head slowly. "No, the emptiness followed me everywhere. Until I stepped into this store." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning neither was ready to fully acknowledge. On the morning of the third day, Samuel stood outside the hotel with his bag packed, waiting for the repaired stagecoach to arrive. His ticket to California was tucked in his pocket. His future awaited him on the coast. Everything he had planned, everything he had prepared for, stood just a few hours away. But his feet would not move toward the loading area. He kept thinking of Elena's smile, the way she laughed when he made a terrible joke, the warmth of her hand beneath his, the way she looked at him as if she could see past all his walls and defenses to the lonely man hiding beneath. The stagecoach pulled into town, its wheels kicking up clouds of dust. The driver called for passing. "Ers to board." Samuel did not move. He watched as other travelers climbed aboard, their faces eager with anticipation of the journey ahead. He watched as the driver loaded luggage and checked the horses. He watched as the coach prepared to depart. And then, without fully understanding what he was doing, Samuel turned and walked in the opposite direction. He found Elena behind the store hanging laundry on a line strung between two posts. The morning sun caught the water droplets on the white sheets, making them sparkle like diamonds. She did not see him approach. "Elena!" She turned, and her expression cycled through surprise, confusion, and something that looked dangerously like hope. "Samuel, the stagecoach is leaving. I heard it arrive. I know." She set down the shirt she had been hanging. "Then why are you still here?" Samuel took a step toward her, then another. He stopped close enough to see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes, close enough to count the freckles scattered across her nose. "Because I didn't plan to come to Copper Springs," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I didn't plan to stay. I didn't plan to walk into your store or repair your shelf or share dinner with you by candlelight. I didn't plan any of it. But something brought me here, Elena, something I don't understand but can't ignore. And I'm not ready to leave." Tears spilled down Elena's cheeks. "You have a life waiting for you in California, a job, a future. That was someone else. E's plan for me, my uncle's plan, my father's plan. I've spent my whole life following plans that other people made." Samuel reached out and gently wiped a tear from her cheek. "For once, I want to follow my heart, and my heart is telling me to stay." "You barely know me," Elena whispered. "Then let me know you. Let me spend the time it takes to learn everything about you, your hopes, your fears, your dreams. Let me prove that not everyone leaves." Elena's lower lip trembled. "I'm scared, Samuel. I've been hurt before. I don't know if I can survive being hurt again." "I'm scared too," he admitted. "I've been alone so long I've forgotten what it feels like to let someone in. But standing here with you, I'm more afraid of leaving than staying. I'm more afraid of spending the rest of my life wondering what might have been than I am of being hurt." For a long moment, Elena said nothing. The wind stirred the hanging laundry, and somewhere in the distance, a horse whinnied. Samuel could hear the stagecoach departing, the sound of hooves and wheels growing fainter as it carried all his plans toward the California coast. Then Elena stepped forward and pressed her forehead against his chest. He could feel her shoulders shaking with silent sobs, his arms wrapped around her instinctively, holding her close, promising without words that he would not let go. "Stay," she whispered against his shirt. "Please stay." The weeks that followed were unlike anything Samuel had experienced. He found work helping the blacksmith, whose arthritis made certain tasks impossible. He learned to respect the desert's harsh beauty and the people who called Copper Springs home. He learned that community was not about size but about connection. Most importantly, he learned what it meant to love someone completely. He and Elena spent every evening together, sometimes talking until midnight, sometimes sitting in comfortable silence watching the stars. He discovered that she dreamed of traveling to see the ocean one day, that she secretly wrote poetry but was too shy to share it with anyone, that she collected feathers from different birds and kept them in a box beneath her bed. She discovered that he played piano, though there was none in Copper Springs, that he had once wanted to be a teacher but his father had forbidden it, that he talked in his sleep and was terrified of scorpions. They were imperfect people with complicated histories, but together they made sense. 6 months after Samuel missed his stagecoach, he knelt in the small garden behind Elena's store and asked her to be his wife. The ring was simple, a thin gold band he had purchased from a traveling merchant, but Elena cried as if he had offered her the crown jewels. "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They married in the little church with the crooked steeple, surrounded by the townspeople who had become their family. The widow from next door wept, openly. The blacksmith played a fiddle he had not touched in 20 years. And Samuel Thornton, the man who had intended to pass straight through Copper Springs on his way to somewhere else, stood at the altar and vowed to love Elena Vasquez until his last breath. That night, as they lay together in the small bedroom above the store, Elena traced patterns on Samuel's chest with her finger. "What happened to the man who was going to California?" she asked softly. "The man with the plan." Samuel kissed her forehead. "He found something better than a plan. He found a home." Years passed, as years do. Samuel and Elena built a life together in Copper Springs. They expanded the general store and added a small schoolhouse where Samuel finally became the teacher he had always wanted to be. They had 3 children who filled their home with noise and laughter and muddy footprints. There were hard times, as there are in any life, droughts that threatened the town's survival, illnesses that stole away neighbors and friends, arguments that left them sleeping on opposite sides of the bed. But through it all, they held on to each other. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Samuel took Elena on a trip to the Pacific Ocean. They stood on the shore together, watching waves crash against the sand, feeling the salt spray on their faces. "Was it worth it?" Elena asked, squeezing his hand. "Giving up California? Giving up all those plans?" Samuel looked at her. Her hair had turned silver now, and lines of age mapped her beautiful face. But her eyes were the same deep brown that had stopped him in his tracks all those years ago in the general store. The eyes that had given him a reason to stay. "I didn't give up anything," he said, pulling her close. "I found everything. I found you." Elena rested her head on his shoulder as they watched the sun set over the ocean, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. "You know," she said quietly, "I used to be angry at that stagecoach for breaking down in our town. I thought it was going to bring me another person who would leave, another disappointment. And now I thank God every day for that broken axle, because it brought you to me." Samuel smiled, feeling the same gratitude swell in his own chest. He had spent so many years running from his past, searching for a future that always seemed just out of reach. He had made plans and followed maps, and believed that happiness was waiting for him in some distant place. But happiness, he had learned, was not a destination. It was a person. It was a choice. It was a broken stagecoach, and a general store, and a woman with sad eyes who had taught him how to love again. He had not planned to go to Copper Springs. He had not planned to stay. He had not planned to fall in love with a shopkeeper's daughter and build a life in a tiny town at the edge of the desert. But love had taken him there, and love had kept him there. And standing on that beach with Elena in his arms, watching the sun sink into the sea, Samuel knew that he was exactly where he was meant to be. Some journeys, he realized, are not about the destination at all. They are about the detours, the unexpected stops, the broken plans that lead us somewhere better than we could have imagined. He had set out for California seeking escape. Instead, he found home in a woman's eyes and a town that time forgot, and he would not trade a single moment of it for all the plans in the world. The ocean continued its eternal dance with the shore as day surrendered to night. Stars emerged one by one, the same stars that had watched over them on their first evening together in that little kitchen behind the store, the same stars that would watch over them for whatever years remained. "Take me home," Elena whispered. "Take me back to Copper Springs." Samuel smiled and kissed her silver hair. "With pleasure, my love, with pleasure." They walked away from the ocean together, hand in hand, two people whose paths had crossed by accident and who had chosen to walk together ever since. He had not planned to go, but love had taken him there.